What's up, y'all? This video is going to be all about Yuta Okkotsu. I've been getting a ton of viewer questions about him, which honestly checks out given what's going on in the manga right now. So this is your warning. If you are not caught up through chapter 250, you're probably going to want to skip this one. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. Alrighty, y'all. First up, we've got this question from Anton over on YouTube. And full disclosure, I just started this video and answered this question, and it was 6 minutes long. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I gotta rein it in. So we're redoing this, and I'm gonna try not to go off the rails. But this is a great question, and it got me going because it's very conceptual. So essentially what Anton wants to know is, if Okkotsu copied Limitless and put that into the barrier of his domain, could he then offset the burden of using Limitless since he doesn't have the 6 eyes? You need the 6 eyes to efficiently control the Limitless. But if you put it in your domain, do you need the 6 eyes? So the reason this is so conceptual is because we got to talk about, is Gojo's domain expansion unique to him, or is everybody that can do the Limitless have Infinite Void as their domain expansion? Now, what I mean by that is Gojo's curse technique is kind of different from most in that the sure hit effect of his domain isn't really the same as his curse technique, if that makes sense. For example, Sukuna, cleave and dismantle, his domain, cleave and dismantle. Gojo's curse technique is the infinite space, defensive wall, blue, red. Domain expansion is infinite void, so it's kind of different. You could argue that infinite void is just the neutral infinity, like that infinity that Gojo uses as a defensive barrier. That concept implied onto a sure hit is what gives the infinite brain dump, right? So if we want to say that, then maybe it would be the same for Okkotsu, right? His domain expansion Limitless would also be infinite void. If those assumptions are what we're operating under, then I don't know if not having the 6 eyes would work for him, because you might need the 6 eyes to be immune to infinite void yourself. Like maybe the reason Gojo doesn't become a vegetable when he casts his domain is because he has the 6 eyes helping him to process all of that information. The other alternative is that just a domain caster is immune to their own effect. So it might be that the 6 eyes are irrelevant, even in Gojo's case, and it doesn't affect him because he's the one that did it, right? So if it's the latter, then Okkotsu could infinite void domain and he wouldn't need the 6 eyes, right? So I think it's possible, but that's only assuming what we just talked about, and also that Okkotsu's version of the Limitless domain would even be infinite void. And if it's not infinite void, then it's kind of irrelevant anyway, because, nothing's going to be better than Angel's curse technique. And even if it was infinite void, Angel's curse technique is better given the explicit plan of that they are using to try to save Megami, because they're trying to destroy the cursed object within Sukuna with that technique. So I managed to cut down the runtime on this question a little bit, so good there. But yeah, we still yapped a lot. And Antoine, great question, man. Next up, we've got a question in a similar vein from someone else who asks, could Yuta use Hakari's technique in his domain's sure hit? And a bunch of the questions we're going to go over today are kind of revolving around potential techniques that Okkotsu could have copied. So I'm just going to say this here once instead of saying it every time. We still don't know how he copies techniques. Is there a condition? Is there not? Kenjaku said it was conditionless, but at that time, it would have been based on memories that he had from being Geto, right, where Okkotsu still had the real Rika, where it might have been conditionless. However, now with this Shikigami version of Rika, it might not be a Shikigami, but we're just going to call it that. There might be conditions, where Rika might have to eat some part of the person to copy their curse technique, or even if that's not it, there might be a condition, whether the technique has to be used on Okkotsu or maybe he just has to see it. Point is, we don't know. So for all of these, we're just going to assume that he did copy it, but we still don't know maybe what the mechanism of the copy even is. So anyway, assuming Okkotsu did copy Hakari's technique, which I think it's fair to say that he probably copied all of his allies' techniques, at least, could he have imbued that in his sure hit? Yeah, I think he could, but the question then becomes, how would that work? Because Hakari is one of those unique cases where his curse technique and his domain are kind of tied hand in hand, and the sure hit effect of his technique is just the rules of the domain. So if Okkotsu did that for his domain, would he get the full-fledged jackpot experience, or would it just be the sure hit information? Like, would Sukuna just get the rules of the domain, but Akotsu wouldn't be able to actually like go for the jackpot. Or maybe he would, but he would have to pick up the sword that corresponded to Hakari's technique to then like, you know, roll the slots. It's probably a question we aren't going to get the answer to, but it's certainly interesting to think about. But just to straight up answer your question, I think he could absolutely put Hakari's technique into the domain. It's just a question of like, what happens then? Next up, we've got a question from Ballas who asks if Akotsu could have copied Megami's technique. So again, this cites back to we don't know what the requirements are, if there even are any, for how he copies techniques. But for my money, I don't think he has Megami's technique because one, Sukuna hasn't used it on him, and two, Megami wouldn't have been able to just give it to him like Akotsu's other allies might have, because Megami is Sukuna right now and hasn't, you know, been a part of the group. So I don't think there would have been an opportunity prior to all of that happening that he would have just given him his technique. But assuming he did have it, could Akotsu beat Mahoraga? Yes, I think so, pretty easily. Just because, well, not easily, I guess, but I think he could do it. Because Mahoraga's whole thing is the adaptation, as you know. So what you need is powerful attacks that he's never seen before, that he doesn't have the chance to adapt to, right? And Akotsu in his domain has a lot of techniques he could throw at Mahoraga. So I think he could get the job done. Speaking of Mahoraga, Wakandan Buttermilk wants to know if perhaps Akotsu is copying techniques similar to how Mahoraga adapts to them, meaning Akotsu needs to be hit by the technique, experience it, and that's the requirement for him being able to copy it. I think this is certainly possible. You bring up some good examples here, and then the other techniques that wouldn't easily fit into those examples, like some of the ones he has from his allies, like Charles's technique, for example, it could easily be explained by the training arc month time skip, right? Maybe all the allies hit Akotsu with their techniques so he could learn them. So I definitely think this is possible. But yeah, again, we're just going to have to wait until we get some sort of confirmation on the process behind this copying. And while we're on the Mahoraga train, we've got this question from Kaizo Kumar, who wants to know if Sukuna could be using Mahoraga behind the scenes to adapt to Yuji and Yuta. And for me, I don't think so. One, Gojo killed Mahoraga, but 10 shadows can be used in totality summonings even if they've been killed. So we've never seen what that would look like, obviously, but theoretically, Mahoraga could be used in a totality summoning to combine some aspects of him with another Shikigami, right? So would that be his adaptability technique? Maybe. So did Sukuna do that? And, you know, he's got Rabbit Escape with the Dharma Chakra Wheel hiding in the shadows. It's at least possible, but I don't think that's what's happening. And then also, you know, we saw Sukuna use certain abilities of Shikigami without summoning them, like Max Elephant's water that he made into a piercing blood. So could he similarly do that with, like, the Dharma Chakra Wheel from Mahoraga? And maybe, but I think that becomes way less likely considering Mahoraga is dead now. Like, I wouldn't assume you could use parts of Shikigami that are gone unless it's in a totality summoning. So one of those things that we'll have to see, you know, theoretically possible, but I don't really see it happening at this point because it would feel kind of like an ass pull, in my opinion, even if it does fit within the rules of what's been established so far. Next up, we got this question from Hendrix, who asks if Akotsu could have copied Cleave from Yuji and not Sukuna. And I think this is definitely on the table. This is actually one of the things I speculated about in a different video. I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but I'll link it below, where I go a little bit more on depth on the potential of how Akotsu has Cleave, whether Rika ate the finger, ate the hand, or maybe he copied it from Yuji. So yeah, I think that's possible. I think that's probably the least likely at this point, though. But yeah, Gojo said that Yuji would have Sukuna's curse technique engraved on his body, right? So if that has happened by now, then Akotsu could seemingly copy it from him, and he wouldn't need Sukuna. Also, while we're on the Yuji train, could Akotsu have just copied Yuji's curse technique? And I think if Yuji does, which there's a lot of speculation still on if he actually has one or not, but if he does, then certainly I think Akotsu could and would have copied it along with all of his other allies' curse techniques. But, you know, that's obviously still a pretty big mystery in and of itself. But yeah, if Yuji has one, then I'm sure Akotsu copied it as well. Next up, we've got a good one from Just Frosty, who wants to know if Akotsu could copy curse spirit manipulation. And I think he absolutely could. Like, he has the ability and the opportunity, having just come from the Kinjaku fight. But like you mentioned, how would that work when he stopped copying it? I'm not sure. Maybe the curse, if he did manage to absorb one, would be set free. So I don't know if we'll actually see this in use, but I think he could copy it, yes. That's going to do it for this one, y'all. Again, huge shout out to everybody here who made this video possible. Thank you all so much, and I will see you guys in the next one.